All right, so today we're going to be doing lecture 24, Statistics and Z-Scores. So I'm going to go over the notes really quickly. There are a couple things you need to know about this, and some things you've seen before in Algebra 1. The first thing that we're going to talk about is the mean, or the average. Those two words mean the same thing. So the mean is going to be the numerical average of a data set. And the way you find it is by adding up all the data. Or adding up all the values. And then you're going to divide by the number of values you have. So the number of values that you're going to have in the data set is called n, and that's just going to be how many you have in the set. So once you add all those numbers up, you divide by how many numbers there are, and you get what's called the average. All right, so the symbol of mean is going to be X bar. It's going to be a capital X with a bar over it. Or you can use the Greek symbol mu. And if you're on Desmos, you're going to use mean of list 1. All right, so here's a quick example of this. Let's say we have 5 numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We want to find the mean of this data set. So what we're going to do is we're going to add up all the numbers first. We add up every single number. And then we're going to divide by how many numbers we have. Since we have 5 numbers in the data set, we're going to put 5 in the denominator. Once you add up all the numbers at the top, you're going to get 15. And then if you divide by 5, you're going to get 3. So the average or the mean of that data set is going to be 3. All right, let's talk about median. Median is the middle number. So the mean is going to be the middle value in a data set. And the way you find this is by arranging all the values from least to greatest. And then choosing the middle value. The symbol for the median is going to be MED. You can write MED, and then in parentheses, you're going to put your list down. So median of list 1. Okay, so going back to our example, we had those 5 numbers. What we do is we arrange them from least to greatest. And then I'm going to mark the numbers out one by one in pairs until I get to the number in the middle, and that's going to be my median. So the median of this list is going to be 3. Same number as the average. Okay, so sometimes there are 2 middle terms. If there are 2 middle terms, then you need to average them, and that'll give you the median. All right, the next one we're going to talk about is the mode. The mode stands for most often. So those first 2 letters of mode, the MO, you can think of those as standing for most often. So this is the value that's going to appear most often in a data set. Here's an important fact. It is possible that there can be more than one mode. And there can also be none at all. So it's not always one number. Keep that in mind. There's no symbol for mode that I could find. Let's do this example. So for this data set, I repeated the 3. The 3 shows up twice. All the other numbers are only going to show up once. So that means the mode for this data set is going to be 3 because it shows up most often. All right, let's talk about minimum and maximum. So the maximum is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to be the maximum number in a data set. It's going to be the largest value. And the symbol for this is going to be max L1, where L1 is your list. And then the minimum is going to be the smallest value in a data set. Or the least. And the symbol for minimum is going to be min, M-I-N, of L1. So that's maximum and minimum. Now let's talk about the range. The range is going to be the difference between the maximum and the minimum. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the maximum and you're going to subtract the minimum. And you get what's called the range. So we can say range of L1 is equal to the maximum of L1 minus the minimum of L1. So you're always taking the maximum and you're subtracting the minimum, and you get what's called the range. And that's just going to be some number. So let's say we have the data set 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 numbers in here. The maximum is going to be the greatest number. That's going to be 5. The minimum is going to be the least number. That's going to be 1. So then the range of L1 is going to be the maximum minus the minimum. So I'll write max L1 minus minimum L1. That's going to be 5 minus 1. And 5 minus 1 is going to give me 4. So the range of this data set is going to be 4. All right, let's talk about standard deviation. So the standard deviation is going to measure how spread out the data is. So standard deviation is going to measure the spread. Now, if the data is close together, then the standard deviation is going to be small. But if the data is spread out pretty far, then the standard deviation is going to be large. So that's all the standard deviation is. It just measures how spread out the data is. The symbol for standard deviation is going to be the Greek letter sigma. It's going to be a lowercase sigma. It kind of looks like a guy with his baseball hat on backwards. And it's the Greek letter for S. That's standard deviation. Another way you can write it, you'll often see STDEV of L1, and that's going to stand for standard deviation. There is a formula for standard deviation. I'll show you what that looks like. So we say sigma is equal to the square root of the sum of all the differences between the data and the average or the mean. The squared differences. And then once you find the sum of all those, you're going to divide by how many data points you have. And then you take the square root of that. That'll get you the standard deviation. All right, let's talk about variance. Variance is going to be the square of the standard deviation. So the symbol for variance is going to be VAR of L1. So we can write VAR, or we can write sigma squared. So if I was to take the standard deviation and then square it, you would get the variance. Also, if I took the square root of the variance, you will get the standard deviation. And then the formula for variance is going to be VAR of L1 is equal to the sum of all those squares, where you take every data point and you subtract the average and you square it. And then you're going to divide by how many data points you have, or n. And that's going to be the formula for variance. Okay, so the last thing that I wanted to talk about was the Z-score. The Z-score is going to be the number of standard deviations a data point is from the mean. it's going to measure how far away a data point is from the mean. Now, you can be greater than the average, or you could be below average. Or you could be equal to the average. And the z-score is going to tell you that. So the symbol for the z-score is going to be z. And when I write my z's, I do them lowercase and I put a horizontal line in my z. And that's just so I don't confuse it with the number 2. The formula for a z-score is going to be z is equal to x minus the average, all divided by the standard deviation. Hey. Yep, you can grab it. The x is going to be the data point. This symbol right here is mu. It's going to be the mean or the average. Same thing. And then this sigma down here in the denominator is the standard deviation. So you'll always be using this formula when you're trying to find the z-scores. Okay. So those are all the terms that I wanted to talk about today. What we're going to do now is we're going to click on the problem set in the module. So go ahead and find the problem set. And we're going to open up Desmos. And I'll show you how to find all this stuff in the Desmos graphing calculator. Okay, so we're here in Desmos, and I have a data set that I want to find all the statistical information for. I want to find all the things that I just talked about. So I want to find the mean, the median, the mode, maximum, minimum, range, standard deviation, and z-scores. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to click into box 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a title for this list. What you're going to do is you're going to type in a capital L and the number 1. And that's going to automatically give that a subscript of 1. And then we're going to set it equal to square brackets. So to find the square brackets, you can use the square brackets on your keyboard, or you can go down to the bottom and hit show keypad. And then the square brackets are going to be in the ABC menu. So down here where you see the ABC, you can click on that. And then in the bottom row, you'll see the square brackets. So I'm going to click on that. And I'm going to put in all my numbers. So all the numbers are going to be separated out by commas. I'm going to type in 10, comma, 20, 30, 40, 50, and another 50. So now that I've got all my numbers in, what I want to do next is I want to close up the square brackets. So I'm going to go down to ABC, and I'm going to click the square brackets on the bottom row. That's going to create another set of square brackets. I don't want that, so I'm going to hit the backspace button over here, and I'm just going to close it up with my keyboard. Okay, so now I've got my list, and at the bottom of the box, it says L1 is a 6-element list. That just means that you have 6 numbers in there. So now what I'm going to do is I want to find some way to visualize all the data. I'm going to click into box 2 right here. I'm going to open up the keypad, and I'm going to go to Functions on the right-hand side. Where it says Functions, I'm going to click that. And then I'm going to have 4 menus to choose from at the top. I'm going to have Trig, Statistics. We're going to be using this menu a lot. Distributions. We're also going to be using this a lot. And then the last one at the end is Miscellaneous. Well, we're going to click on Distributions. And what you'll see is under Visualizations, you have 3 ways that you can visualize the data. You can use a histogram, a dot plot, or a box plot. We're going to choose histogram. So once I click on histogram, it's going to show up in box 2. And it's going to ask for 2 things on the inside. It's going to ask for the data set. My data set is L1. So I'm going to type in capital L1. And then it's going to ask for the bin width. We're going to put a comma down, and we're going to put in 1. So that just means the width of all the boxes is going to be 1. Now at this point, I can't really see it that well, but what we can do is we can hit the zoom fit button at the bottom of the box. See this magnifying glass with the plus sign on the inside? We're going to click that once, and that'll zoom in on our histogram. On the x-axis, you'll see the data set, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. And then on the y-axis right here, you'll see how many times the numbers show up. So every number is going to show up once, except for 50. 50 shows up twice. And you can see that it comes up to 2 on the y-axis. So that just means the 50 is going to show up twice. Everything else shows up once. So now what I want to do is I want to find the mean, the median, and the mode. We're going to click into box 3, and we're going to type in mean L1. So MEAN, and then in parentheses, I'm going to type in L1. Close up my parentheses, and at the bottom of the box, it's going to give me 33 and 1/3. So 33.3 repeating. That's going to be the average of the data set, or the mean. So what you can do with this decimal is usually we round it to 2 decimal points. So I'm going to write my answer as 33.33. That's going to be the mean. Now what I want to do is I want to find the median. For the median, you have to type in MED of L1. I'm going to type in median as the word. There we go. And then I'm going to type in L1. So you do have to type in median, the entire word. And it tells me that the median at the bottom of the box is 35. That's going to be the middle of the data set. Now for mode, there is no function for mode. If you go to functions down here on the keypad and you go to stats at the top, you'll notice that there's a function for mean, median, everything else, but there's no mode. So what you have to do is you have to see which bar is the tallest. And that's going to tell you which number shows up the most. And here, the number that shows up the most is going to be 50. So the mode for this data set is 50. It shows up twice. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to find the maximum and the minimum. To find the maximum, you type in max of L1, capital L1, and it's going to give you 50. And I'm going to close that up. That's going to be the greatest value in the data set. That's the maximum. For the minimum, you're going to type in MIN of L1, and it gives me 10. So that's going to be the smallest number in the data set. Next, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the range. The range is going to be the maximum. So I'm going to type in maximum L1, and then I'm going to subtract the minimum. And then once I type all that in, I get 50 minus 10. That's going to give me 40. So the range for this data set is going to be 40. Next, I'm going to find the standard deviation. To find standard deviation, you're going to type in ST DEV. The ST is going to be standard, and DEV is going to be deviation. And then in parentheses, you have to type in L1. So for this one, it tells me that the standard deviation is going to be 16.33. This 9 right here is going to tell this 2 to go up to a 3. So the standard deviation is going to be 16.33. The standard deviation measures how spread out the data is. And the bigger the standard deviation is, the more spread out all the data points are going to be. And if you want to find the variance, you need to type in VAR of L1. And all that does is it squares the standard deviation. So if I take 16.33 and I multiply it by itself, I'm going to get 266.67. And that's my variance. So the last thing I'm going to do with number 1 is I'm going to find the z-score. Now, it tells me to find the z-score for 40. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up a set of parentheses, and I'm going to type in 40. And then I'm going to subtract the average. What was the average or the mean? It was 33.33. So 33.33. I'm going to close that up. And then I'm going to divide everything by the standard deviation. The standard deviation was 16.33. And then whatever I get, I'm going to round that to the nearest hundredth place. So this 8 is going to tell this 0 to go up by 1. So my z-score is going to be 0.41. Now, because my z-score is positive, 0.41 is positive, right? That means that the data that I chose is higher than the average. So 40 is going to be above the average of 33. If my z-score was negative, let's say instead of 40, I wanted to find the z-score for 20. So if I type in 20, I get a z-score of negative 0.82. If my z-score is negative, that means that the data point that I chose was below average.
Does it matter which number you choose?
It'll tell you which one to choose in the problem. So it says z-score for 40. So I've always got my data point. I subtract the average on top, and then I'm going to divide what I get by the standard deviation. Okay. So the last thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to show you some other ways that you can visualize the data. What we're going to do is we're going to pull up the keypad and we're going to go to functions again. We're going to go to distributions. And this time we're going to choose dot plot. It'll be the middle one in the list. Once I click on that, dot plot is going to show up in my box. Before I type in the list, L1, I want to get rid of my histogram. So I'm going to scroll up to the top and hit the X button on the histogram. That's going to make that disappear. And then inside dot plot, I'm going to put L1, comma 1 for the width. So now on your graph, you can see that 10, 20, 30, 40 are going to show up just once, but 50 is going to show up twice. So that's what a dot plot looks like. And then the last thing that I want to do is show you the box plot. So I'm going to click the X on the dot plot to make that disappear. I'm going to click into the box and I'm going to go to functions again. Under distributions, I'm going to click on box plot. And then it's going to ask for the data set. I'm going to type in L1. So then on the screen, you're going to get your box plot. The minimum of the box plot is going to be 10. The maximum is 50. And this line in the middle of the box is going to be the median or the middle value. And we know from this that our median was 35. So this line should be at 35 on the x-axis. And then the other two ends of the box are going to be Q1 and Q3. Those are the quartiles. If you want to figure out what those are, you can go to functions. And then under statistics, you'll see quartile. I'm going to click on quartile on the left side. And then if I type in L1, Okay, so you need to type in your list and then put a comma down and then put in a 1. And it'll tell you what Q1 is. So at the bottom of the box, it says 20. That's going to be this end of the box. And if I want to find out what Q2 is, I can type in a 2 instead of a 1. That's going to give me the median or the middle of the box. And then Q3, if I take away this 2 and put a 3, it's going to give me the third quartile, which is 50. That's going to be the right edge of the box. So I'm going to X out of that. If you don't want to type in quartile, you could just type in stats and then put in L1. And it'll give you the minimum, Q1, the median, Q3, and the maximum. It'll just show all that for you. So that is it. That's how you find statistics on Desmos.